Evan Carter never imagined the deepest cut would come not from a stranger, but from the woman he loved. One moment he was standing in a sea of glittering gowns and champagne toasts at a Manhattan gala, proud to be at his wife's side. The next, Serafina pressed an envelope into his hand with a cold smile and walked away, straight into the arms of Cassian Lorne, her lover, in front of their entire social circle. His throat tightened as the words on the divorce papers blurred, but the real pain came later, when his 9-year-old son, Declan, asked at bedtime, "Do I call him Daddy Cassian now?" Evan sat on the edge of his bed that night, silent, shattered, and alone, wondering when the love story of his life had turned into an ambush, and how much more he was about to lose. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from all over the world.
Your comments create a community where storytelling thrives, and we're so grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and prepare for a journey that will keep you hooked from start to finish. Let's get started. I never thought the night that broke me would come dressed in silk and champagne. The Metropolitan Museum Gala was the kind of event most people only saw in glossy magazines. The kind where the air smelled like power, ambition, and money. My wife, Serafina Vale, glided through the marble halls like she belonged there, every inch the Upper East Side socialite, tall, striking, her champagne-colored gown hugging her like a second skin. I walked 2 steps behind, the tech world husband in a tailored suit, smiling for cameras, shaking hands, laughing at jokes I didn't find funny. But inside, I felt the hollowness, the growing distance between us, the way she barely looked at me anymore, the way her hand slid from mine too quickly. We'd been married almost 10 years. In the early days, it was fire. She was the dazzling, untouchable heiress. I was the rising tech entrepreneur from nothing. We were magnetic together. But over the years, the sharp heat cooled. I poured myself into work and fatherhood, into Declan and Zara, our 2 kids. Serafina poured herself into image, fundraisers, magazine features, Instagram-perfect brunches with Manhattan's elite. That night at the gala, I watched her light up for other people. She laughed easily, draping her hand on arms that weren't mine, turning her head to catch Cassian Lorne's whispers with the kind of soft, intimate smile I hadn't seen from her in years. Cassian, the art dealer, the socialite's socialite, the man who'd somehow always been there, first as a family friend, then as a business connection, then as something I couldn't name but felt curling around my life like smoke. I remember the exact moment. She turned to me on the balcony, the city glittering behind her, and handed me a slim white envelope. "Evan," she said quietly, "it's time." My heart pounded as I opened it. Divorce papers, signed, filed, already in motion. She didn't explain, didn't argue, didn't cry. She just pressed a hand lightly to my chest, a touch that used to mean love, now just a polite exit, and slipped away. I watched as she walked straight to Cassian. His hand settled easily at the small of her back as they disappeared into the crowd. I stood frozen, fingers tightening around the papers. My throat closed. I couldn't breathe. The noise of the gala swelled around me. Laughter, music, champagne glasses clinking. But all I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, to ask how we got here. But I knew, deep down, I already knew. This hadn't started tonight. It had been unraveling for months, maybe years. Back home, the penthouse was silent. Declan, 9 years old, was asleep on the couch, a tablet slipping from his hand. Zara, 7, was curled up in her room, her little body pressed against a stuffed fox. I tucked them in quietly, smoothing Declan's hair, kissing Zara's forehead. My throat ached as I watched them breathe, peaceful,
unaware that everything they knew was about to split in two. That night, I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the divorce papers under the dim bedside lamp. The room around me, glass walls, designer furniture, Serafina's curated art, felt like a showroom. Cold, sterile. I'd built this life thinking it was for us, for our family. But now, stripped bare, it was just a set, a backdrop for a marriage that had been over long before I admitted it. The next morning, the kids' voices pulled me out of my haze. They were laughing over cereal, Zara telling a silly joke, Declan correcting her with big brother seriousness. For a few moments, everything felt normal. But as I walked into the kitchen, Declan looked up with wide eyes. "Dad?" he asked, hesitating. Do I call him Daddy Cassian now? The question hit me like a gut punch. I crouched beside him, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "You already have a dad, buddy," I said softly, brushing his hair back. "That's me. That's enough." He nodded, small and unsure, and went back to his cereal. But the words echoed through me, sharp and raw. That was when I knew. This wasn't just a divorce. It was an erasure. Days passed in a blur.
Serafina moved out swiftly, efficiently, slipping into Cassian's penthouse without missing a step. Social media buzzed with pictures of the modern blended family. Serafina, Cassian, Declan, Zara, and Cassian's daughter Lyric from a previous relationship. They smiled on rooftops, at brunch, on school pickups. Hashtags floated beneath every post. #our family, #blessed life. New beginnings. I watched from the sidelines, holding my breath every time I opened the parenting app. One night, Declan came home from Serafina's, quiet and tense. "Mom says we're all one family now," he mumbled as we unpacked his school bag. "That we should all help each other." I forced my voice to stay calm. "And what do you think, bud?" He shrugged. "I don't know." Zara, younger but no less perceptive, added from the corner, "Mom says you're being mean." That night, after they went to bed, I stared at my phone in the dark. Notifications blinked. Requests from Serafina to contribute to Lyric's tuition, to split costs on a family vacation, to pay for all 3 kids' summer camp. The amounts were staggering, but it wasn't just the money. It was the message, step up or step out. I hadn't wanted a war, but it was becoming clear. Serafina and Cassian weren't just rewriting their own story. They were trying to rewrite mine. When Damon Torres, my best friend, showed up at my door with Thai takeout and his no-nonsense voice, I nearly broke down. Damon, the only person who'd been there from the beginning, before the company, before the marriage, before the kids. "You can't just let them steamroll you," Damon said firmly, scrolling through the social media posts on his phone. "They're not just moving on, Evan. They're replacing you." I ran a hand through my hair. "I don't want to drag the kids through hell." Damon's eyes sharpened. "You want to protect them? Then be their father. Don't sit here while some art world fraud and his PR-obsessed wife erase you." He was right. I just didn't know if I had the fight in me. That night, after Damon left, I stood alone at the window. The skyline glittered like it always did. Indifferent, vast. My reflection stared back at me. A man I barely recognized. My fingers itched toward my phone. The parenting app open, staring at the messages. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel grief. I felt anger. I felt resolve. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from all over the world. Your comments create a community where storytelling thrives, and we're so grateful to have you here. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. Now, settle in, get comfortable,
and prepare for a journey that will keep you hooked from start to finish.
Let's get started. I stared at my laptop screen long after midnight, the blue light flickering across the empty living room. Declan's science project lay half-finished on the table. Zara's pink sneakers were kicked under the couch, and beyond the windows, Manhattan glowed with its usual indifference. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unread emails piling up. But no message mattered more than the one that had landed earlier that day. A formal legal notice from Serafina's lawyers, petition to modify custody, on the grounds of emotional neglect and refusal to co-parent within a blended family. The words hit me harder than the divorce papers ever had. It wasn't enough that she'd left. It wasn't enough that she'd paraded Cassian through our kids' lives like a prize. Now she was coming for the one thing she hadn't been able to strip away in court: my place as their father. The weeks following the gala had been a slow-moving ambush. At first, Serafina played nice. She suggested new family traditions, holidays together, joint birthday parties with Cassian, matching vacations where all the siblings could bond. When I hesitated, she slipped in guilt. "It's confusing for Declan and Zara when you treat Lyric like she's not part of the family," she texted one night. I stared at the message, my jaw tight. Lyric was Cassian's daughter from a previous relationship, a sweet, wide-eyed 7-year-old I barely knew, and now, somehow, I was being pushed to cover her ballet classes, her tuition, her birthday gifts, and soon, a summer camp package costing nearly 20 grand. When I told Serafina no, calmly, politely, with every reason laid out, the mask slipped. "You're divisive, Evan," she fired back. "You're damaging the kids with your selfishness." That's when I called Damon. He showed up with his laptop, a box of greasy noodles, and his no-bullshit attitude. "You're not paranoid, Evan," he said, setting up in my kitchen. "You're under attack." Damon Torres had been my best friend since college. He'd watched me go from broke coder to CEO, had stood at my wedding, had helped paint Declan's nursery when Serafina was pregnant. Now, as a cybersecurity consultant, he saw the world in patterns, and he was seeing one I couldn't ignore. "She's playing the long game," he said, scrolling through Serafina's public posts. "Family branding, image curation. She's positioning Cassian as not just the new husband, but the new father figure." He turned his laptop to show me. Photos from school galas, charity runs, brunches, museum trips. Declan on Cassian's shoulders, Zara holding Cassian's hand. Captions like, #our family, #blessed, #new beginnings. In none of them was I mentioned. "Do you want me to run a full check?" Damon asked quietly. "Private investigator, social tracking, financial pulls?" I hesitated. But then I remembered Declan's small voice that morning. "Do I call him Daddy Cassian now?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah," I said. "Do it." The report came back 2 weeks later, and it nearly dropped me to my knees. Serafina's affair with Cassian hadn't started after we separated. It hadn't started during the rough months leading to divorce. It had started years ago. There were photos from art fairs in Paris, joint hotel bookings, luxury gifts billed under Cassian's gallery but traceable to our shared credit lines. Damon's contact, a private investigator who worked discreetly with family cases, handed over receipts, flight manifests, and messages Serafina thought she'd deleted. But that wasn't the worst part. Cassian wasn't just an ambitious art dealer. He was a man with a carefully curated facade, and behind it, a trail of reckless debt, hidden affairs, and private escapades that would explode his reputation if they went public. "He's been paying off male companions for years," Damon said bluntly, pulling up transactions labeled as consulting fees. "Photographers, models, assistants, you name it." My stomach turned. Serafina had left me, publicly humiliated me, to build a perfect blended family with a man she didn't even fully know, or maybe refused to see.
When I met Serafina for the next custody exchange, I saw it with new eyes. She was radiant as ever, flawless in a cream coat, sunglasses pushed up into her honey blonde hair. Cassian stood next to her in his usual polished way, greeting parents with a warm smile, slipping an arm around Serafina's waist like he'd been born to it. Declan ran up to me, backpack bouncing, a wide grin on his face. Zara clung to my leg, babbling about school. For a moment, it was just us. Then Cassian bent down beside Declan, straightened his jacket, and said, "Hey, champ, don't forget we've got that Lego build after dinner, okay?" I felt the air squeeze out of my chest. Declan turned, hesitant, looking at me. "Is it okay if I call him Daddy Cassian sometimes? Mom says it's respectful." Serafina smiled lightly, arms sliding through Cassian's. "It's about making things easier, Evan. You don't want to be difficult, do you?" I wanted to scream, but instead, I just bent down, kissed Declan's head, and said quietly, "You already have a dad, buddy. That's me." Back at home, I sat in the dark with Alina Cho on the line. Alina was the sharpest family lawyer in Manhattan, the kind who didn't waste words or coddle feelings. "They're filing for primary custody," she said matter-of-factly. "Emotional neglect, financial refusal, unstable co-parenting." I closed my eyes. "Do they have a shot?" "They're pushing an image," Alina replied coolly. "But image isn't evidence." "You, on the other hand, have 3 years' worth of tuition payments, medical coverage, extracurricular funding, and presence at every school event. And now," her voice sharpened, "we have something they don't." She meant Damon's file. Cassian's hidden life, the messy truth behind the polished brand. That night, Declan sat beside me, cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through his tablet. "Dad," he said softly, "do you think Mom's mad at you?" I forced a smile. "Why do you ask, buddy?" He hesitated, fingers picking at the corner of the tablet. "I heard her talking to Cassian. She said you're selfish, that you don't care about all of us. About Lyric, too." My throat closed. "I love you, Declan. I love Zara. That's never going to change." He leaned into my side, small and warm. "I know," he whispered. "I just don't want you to go away." My heart broke right there. I wrapped an arm around him, holding on like I was anchoring myself. After they were asleep, I called Damon. "I'm in," I told him quietly. "No more waiting. No more hoping they'll stop. Let's get ready." Damon didn't gloat, didn't laugh, didn't even sound surprised. "Good," he said. "I've already started." In the weeks that followed, Damon pulled every digital thread, transactions buried under false names, private messages between Cassian and Serafina mocking me. "He's soft. He'll fold. He always does." Payments to male consultants tied to Cassian's business trips. Whispers from inside the art world about Cassian's reputation and the cracks showing under his perfect facade. Alina's office compiled everything. Every dollar I'd paid for Declan and Zara, every event I'd attended, every attempt I'd made to co-parent fairly. Meanwhile, Serafina's texts escalated. "Why are you being so difficult? Don't make this harder on the kids. Cassian is stepping up where you're falling short." Each one chipped away at the last pieces of my patience. One evening, after Damon emailed over the latest batch of findings, I sat alone in my apartment, the city glowing beyond the windows. Declan's drawings lined the fridge. Zara's shoes were neatly set by the door. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. Not anymore. I realized then, they weren't just fighting for custody. They were fighting to rewrite my role, to erase me, to cast me as a footnote in my own children's lives. And I was done playing defense. I picked up my phone and called Alina. "Let's go," I told her. Are you sure? She asked, calm as ever. I took a breath, long and steady, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Yes, I said. It's time. And for the first time since Serafina handed me that envelope at the gala, I knew. This wasn't just about holding on. This was about fighting back. The morning sun sliced through the blinds of my apartment, landing in thin, sharp lines across the floor. I sat at the kitchen table, a mug of cold coffee in front of me, barely touched. On the other side of the room, Declan sat cross-legged on the couch, building a Lego spaceship with quiet concentration, and Zara hummed softly at the dining table, scribbling in her coloring book. It should have been a peaceful moment, a father with his kids, just a normal Saturday. But inside, I was bracing for impact. I hadn't told them yet that things were about to change. Again. That behind the scenes, a legal war was building. That their mother wasn't just pushing for more money or more time. She was pushing to shift the entire center of their lives away from me. The first blow came later that day at the school gala. I'd promised Declan I would come. His robotics project had made it into the school showcase. I walked in quietly, dressed in a simple navy suit, no entourage, no spotlight. I spotted Declan from across the room, grinning with pride as he showed off his robot arm to his classmates. And then I saw them. Serafina and Cassian, gliding through the crowd like they owned it. Serafina's laugh floated easily over the music, her arm looped through Cassian's, her smile wide and polished. Cassian bent down to clap Declan on the back, ruffling his hair, slipping smoothly into photos with parents and teachers. He wasn't just present, he was playing the part, weaving himself deeper into the narrative of our children's lives. I hung back, watching. I didn't want to make a scene. But when Declan spotted me, his face lit up. "Dad!" he shouted, running over. I knelt to hug him, holding him tightly for a second longer than I should have. "You did amazing, bud," I murmured. He beamed. "Cassian helped me practice." My stomach tightened. "That's great," I managed, keeping my voice steady. After the event, Serafina approached me near the exit, her heels clicking sharply on the tile. "We need to talk," she said softly, glancing around with the kind of calculated calm that told me she'd rehearsed this moment. Cassian lingered a few feet away, shaking hands, smiling his politician's smile. "It's time you understand something, Evan," Serafina said, tilting her head slightly. "The kids need consistency, stability, one home base. Cassian and I can give them that. You—" She gave me a light, pitying smile. "You're struggling." I felt my fists clench at my sides. "I'm their father, Serafina," I said quietly. "I've always been their father." "Then act like it," she snapped, her polished mask cracking for half a second. "Help us. Be part of the family, or step aside." Cassian drifted over, slipping an arm around her waist. "No hard feelings, brother," he said smoothly. "We're all just thinking about what's best for the kids." I turned and walked out before I said something that would haunt me. That night, at home, Declan was unusually quiet. I found him in his room, staring at his tablet. "Hey, bud," I said, sitting on the edge of his bed. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated, eyes still on the screen. "Cassian says we're lucky, that not all kids get two dads." I swallowed hard. "You know you'll always have me, right?" He looked up then, his face small and worried. "But will you still come to my games, if I live more with Mom and Cassian?" It was the first time he'd voiced it, the first time I'd heard the shift out loud. I pressed my hand to his shoulder. "I'm not going anywhere, Declan. I will always be here." But inside, something cracked. Damon came over the next morning, pacing as he read through the new financial demands Serafina had sent.
$60,000 for lyrics tuition, $25,000 for a family bonding Aspen trip, $18,000 per kid for summer camp, and they expect you to pay for all three, including lyric. I rubbed a hand over my face. It's not about the money. I know, Damon said grimly. It's about control. He flipped open his laptop and pulled up the files he'd been compiling. Look at this, he muttered, scrolling through bank records, private message threads, and whispered accounts from people inside Cashin's world. He's not just a smooth-talking art dealer. He's drowning in debt, loans from investors, secret side arrangements, payments to male companions disguised as consulting fees. I stared at the screen, numb. And Serafina? I asked. She either doesn't know, Damon said, his voice tight, or she doesn't care. Alina, my lawyer, called later that week. They've filed, she said without preamble. Petition for primary custody. I sank into the kitchen chair, heart pounding. They're framing you as emotionally unavailable, financially selfish, and unwilling to support the blended family structure, Alina continued calmly. But here's what we have. Years of records showing you've paid for your children's schooling, medical care, activities. We have statements from teachers, coaches, and thanks to Damon, we have evidence of Cassian's hidden life. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of it all. This is going to get ugly, isn't it? I asked softly. It's already ugly, Alina said. But you're not powerless. The final straw came one night when Declan asked to stay up late. Why, buddy? I asked, surprised. He shifted awkwardly. Mom and Cassian were fighting. I don't want to be there tonight. My stomach dropped. When I texted Serafina to let her know he was staying over, she replied with a thumbs down emoji. No words, just that. And I knew. We were done playing at civility. Damon, Alina, and I met the next day in Alina's office, the skyline wide and cold outside the window. We're not just defending you anymore, Alina said, flipping through the file. We're going on the offensive. Damon leaned back, arms crossed. We've got everything lined up. The money trail, the manipulated images, the private conversations, the gambling debts, the other expenses. Cassian's been living on borrowed time. I let out a long, shaky breath. I just want to protect my kids, I said quietly. Alina met my eyes. That's exactly what we're doing. I picked up Declan and Zara that Friday from school. They ran to me, laughing, their backpacks bouncing, their arms wrapping around my waist. Dad, guess what? Zara squealed. We're doing a father-daughter dance next month. I lifted her into my arms, smiling so hard it hurt. For that moment, none of the court dates or legal filings mattered. None of the battles ahead dimmed the joy of their small arms around me. That night, after they were asleep, I stood at the window, the city stretching endlessly below. Serafina and Cassian wanted to rewrite our family, to replace me in my children's lives, to cast me as the selfish, absent father in their curated, polished story. But they underestimated something. They underestimated me. I wasn't the man who folded. I wasn't the man who ran. I wasn't the man who bowed out. I was their father, and I was ready to fight. The first official blow landed on a Wednesday. I was at Declan's school, standing quietly by the cafeteria doors, waiting to pick him up from robotics club. Parents clustered in small, polished groups, designer coats, handbags, whispered conversations. I was used to feeling slightly out of place here, but today the glances were sharper, the murmurs more pointed. I knew why. Across the room, Serafina stood beside Cassian, laughing lightly with another mother, hand resting on Cassian's chest like they were a golden couple cut from a magazine spread. Cassian was in full performance mode, shaking hands, ruffling Declan's hair, charming teachers, volunteering for the next art fundraiser.
I watched as he crouched beside Declan, murmuring something that made my son grin wide. Declan turned instinctively, looking for me. His face lit up and he ran over, breathless. "Dad, look what Cassian gave me!" He held up a glossy Lego set. The expensive kind, the kind I'd said no to last week because we were focusing on schoolwork. I smiled tightly, ruffling his hair. "That's awesome, buddy." Inside, I felt something curl and twist. Serafina approached, smooth as silk. "We should talk," she said softly, stepping aside with me near the exit. Cassian hung back, arms crossed, watching like a man already sure of the outcome. "It's time," Serafina began, voice calm, "that we have one stable home base for the kids. It's been hard, Evan. On them, on everyone." I felt my jaw tighten. "We have a custody agreement." Her smile flickered. "Agreements can change." Then she added quietly, "I don't want to go to court, but if you keep refusing to support this family, emotionally and financially, we may have no choice." I stared at her, searching for the woman I married, the woman I once knew, but all I saw was someone polished and practiced, someone who had rewritten the story so thoroughly she believed it. Cassian walked up then, slipping an arm casually around her waist. "No hard feelings, brother," he said smoothly. "We're just trying to do what's best for the kids." That night, I sat on the edge of Declan's bed, watching him fall asleep. Zara had already curled up with her stuffed fox, breathing softly. I brushed Declan's hair back from his forehead, feeling the small weight of his trust, his quiet faith that no matter how chaotic the world got, his dad would always be there. When they were asleep, I called Damon. "They're coming," I said quietly. Damon's voice was sharp. "We've got more than they know." In the following days, Damon pulled together the full scope of Cassian's world and its cracks. On the surface, Cassian was still the brilliant art dealer, the golden touch behind gallery openings, a man celebrated in Manhattan society pages. But underneath, a trail of debt, private loans, whispers of unpaid artists and angry collectors, and, most damning, transactions disguised as consulting fees to male models, escorts, companions. I sat in Damon's apartment late into the night as he pulled up the records on his screens. "He's not just a liar," Damon said, shaking his head. "He's a bomb waiting to go off." Alina, on speakerphone, was cool and surgical. "When we bring this into court, it will destroy their narrative," she said. "But Evan, you have to be ready. They won't fold quietly." At the next custody exchange, Zara ran into my arms, chattering about dance class. Declan hung back, glancing nervously between me and Cassian. When we were alone, I knelt beside him. "Everything okay, bud?" He fidgeted with his sleeve. "Mom says you're mad because you don't want to help. With Lyric. With everything." I felt the sharp slice of it. "And what do you think?" He hesitated, then whispered, "I just don't want to lose you." My throat closed. I pulled him into a tight hug, pressing my face into his hair. "You're not going to lose me," I murmured. "Not ever." That weekend, Serafina sent a string of texts. "We need to talk about tuition for all 3 kids. It's unfair to divide the household like this. Cassian is willing to step up. Why aren't you?" The subtext was clear. Pay up, or we escalate. Monday morning, Alina called. They filed. Primary custody. On grounds of emotional neglect, refusal to co-parent, financial division creating sibling tension. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the table, heart pounding. "We're ready," Alina said. "You just have to say the word." I said the word. The next 2 weeks were a blur of meetings, affidavits, document reviews. We gathered everything. Receipts of my payments for Declan and Zara's schooling, medical care, activities, witness statements from teachers, coaches, school administrators.
dashcam audio from Damon's car at custody exchanges, picking up Cassian's snide comments and Serafina's cold dismissals. And then, the centerpiece, Damon's dossier on Cassian. The debts, the secret payments, the double life behind the polished mask. The hardest moments weren't in the strategy sessions. They were at home.
Late at night, Zara asked softly, "Daddy, are we okay?" And Declan, sitting at the table doing homework, suddenly said, "Dad, are you going to have to leave?" I pulled them both into my arms, holding on so tight it hurt. "No," I said fiercely. "I'm not going anywhere." The day before the court hearing, Damon came by with takeout. We sat on the balcony, the city stretching wide below. "You good?" he asked quietly. I let out a shaky breath. "No, but I'm ready." He nodded. Inside, Declan and Zara were building a Lego castle, Zara carefully balancing a turret while Declan guided her hand. I watched them, chest tight. "They're why we do this," I murmured. Damon smiled faintly. "Yeah, man, they are." That night, as the city hummed outside, I sat by myself in the quiet apartment. I thought about everything. The girl I met at a tech mixer who dazzled me, who pulled me into her world. The family we built. The way it cracked, slowly at first, then all at once. I thought about Serafina, about the look in her eyes when she handed me the divorce papers at the gala, about Cassian's hand on her back as they walked away. And I thought about the kids, about their small voices, their trust, their hope that somehow I would still be there at the end of this storm. In the morning, I would walk into a courtroom. But tonight, I stood in the doorway of my kids' room, watching them sleep. I didn't feel powerless. I didn't feel defeated. I felt clear. This wasn't just about a custody battle. It was about keeping my place as their father. It was about protecting the only thing that mattered. It was about not letting anyone, not Serafina, not Cassian, not the courts, rewrite who I was to my children. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt ready. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, tying my tie with shaking fingers. My reflection stared back, pale, jaw tight, dark circles under my eyes. I closed them for a moment, inhaling slow and deep, trying to steady the thudding in my chest. From the living room, I could hear Declan and Zara arguing over cereal, their voices sharp, then softening into laughter. That was the sound I held on to, not the emails, not the legal threats, not Serafina's clipped texts or Cassian's smug smile. Them, just them. The courthouse was a marble and glass monument to power. Cameras lined the steps, though they weren't there for me. They were there for Cassian, whose name carried weight in Manhattan's art world. Inside, Serafina swept through the lobby in black designer silk, chin high, sunglasses large, every inch the woman who wanted the world to know she was unbothered. Cassian walked beside her, navy suit sharp, silver cufflinks gleaming, flashing that easy smile to reporters. I arrived with no fanfare, flanked only by Alina and Damon. I'd never felt more like an outsider, but I'd also never felt more determined. Inside the courtroom, it was cool, still, hushed. Serafina's lawyer painted the story first. Evan Carter, emotionally unavailable, unwilling to co-parent. Cassian Lorne, stepping up as a father figure, providing stability. Declan and Zara, thriving under the new blended family, but held back by a father who refused to embrace change. I sat stiffly, hands clasped, as they laid it out. Vacations, school events, social media photos, all spinning the picture of a father fading from relevance. Then, Alina rose. Piece by piece, she dismantled the illusion. First, the financials. Every tuition payment, medical bill, after-school program, summer camp fee I'd covered. Second, the presents, school records, teacher affidavits, coach statements, evidence that I was there. At games, at recitals, at parent meetings. Third, and most devastating, Damon's evidence. The courtroom shifted as Alina presented it. Financial documents showing Cassian's private loans, debts masked behind gallery expenses, hidden transfers labeled consulting fees to male companions, screenshots of messages between Serafina and Cassian, laughing at how soft I was, how easy it would be to push me aside. A low ripple spread through the room. Cassian's jaw tightened. Serafina went pale, but Alina wasn't done. She played a short clip from Damon's dashcam, Cassian's voice, low and dismissive at a pickup. "Your dad just doesn't get how families work," followed by Serafina's. "Maybe if we guilt him hard enough, he'll pay for Lyric's camp too." I stared down at the table, jaw clenched, heart hammering. This was the truth, finally laid bare. When Cassian took the stand, his charm cracked. Under Alina's cross, the smoothness faltered. The debts, the affairs, the financial manipulation. It was all there, and the more he tried to explain, the worse it sounded. Serafina sat stiffly beside her lawyer, her fingers white around a pen. The judge, when the ruling came, was calm and clear. 70-30 custody in my favor. All communication to go through a monitored co-parenting app. No financial obligation from me for Lyric or Serafina's household, and all legal fees, nearly $180,000, to be paid by Serafina and Cassian. The words hit like thunder. I closed my eyes briefly, exhaling. Outside the courthouse, the media swarmed. Serafina moved quickly, head down, lips tight. Cassian gave a brittle half-smile, a flicker of his old confidence, but the cracks showed. Investors were already pulling out, gallery owners were calling his credibility into question, and the stories, about his debts, his secret affairs, were beginning to circulate. They'd built a life on performance. Now the curtain had been ripped away. I stepped outside into the sunlight, Alina at my side, Damon clapping me lightly on the back. And then, "Dad!" Declan's voice, high and joyful, cutting through the noise. I turned just in time to catch him as he ran into my arms, Zara barreling after him, wrapping her small arms around my leg. "Are we going home now?" Zara asked, her voice muffled against my coat. "Yeah," I said softly, crouching to pull them both close. "We're going home." That night, back at the apartment, the three of us sat on the floor with pizza, the TV playing some cartoon in the background, laughter echoing off the walls. It was messy, loud, imperfect. It was ours. Alone later, after they were asleep, I stood at the window, looking out at the city. I thought about Serafina, about how, in her eyes, love had always been performance. About Cassian, who had been drawn to shine but crumbled under weight. And I thought about myself, the man who had been underestimated, outplayed, nearly erased. But in the end, I was still here, still their father, still standing. I heard a soft sound and turned to see Damon at the doorway, holding 2 beers. He raised one. "To freedom," he said quietly. I smiled, taking it. We clinked bottles, and for the first time in years, I felt the knot in my chest begin to loosen. In the background, I heard Declan's voice stir in his sleep, Zara murmuring softly. I closed my eyes, exhaled. We had made it through the storm. We were home. It's strange how quiet victory can be. The morning after the ruling, I woke up to the sun streaming through the windows of my townhouse, the faint sound of Zara singing to herself in her room, Declan thumping down the hallway, half-dressed and laughing. It was the first morning in months I didn't wake up with a tightness in my chest or a weight pressing on my ribs. We were free, not free from challenge or complexity, but free from the constant erosion, the quiet erasure Serafina and Cassian had tried to execute, the slow theft of my role as father. But across town, the fallout was just beginning. Damon had been tracking the media swirl all night. By the time I met him at the coffee shop near Central Park, his laptop was already open, articles pulled up side by side. Cassian's world was cracking. Investor withdrawals, gallery partners distancing, rumors spilling into the press, the debts, the private retreats, the suspicious payments labeled as consulting fees to male models and assistants. The art world, so quick to celebrate Cassian's charm and curatorial eye, was turning cold. Serafina, too, was feeling the sting. Friends pulling back, charity boards quietly removing her name, Instagram followers dropping, sponsorship deals freezing. Overnight, the glamorous image she'd crafted, had our family, hash blessed life, was showing its seams. I took a long sip of coffee, staring out the window at the park. Damon nudged me. "You're quiet." I shrugged. "It's not the win I thought it would feel like." He studied me, then nodded. "Because it was never about beating them, right?" I exhaled. "No, it was about saving what mattered." That evening, after dinner, Declan pulled me aside. "Dad," he said, voice hesitant, "are you okay?" I knelt down, meeting him eye to eye. "Yeah, buddy, I'm okay." His shoulders eased, and then he said, quieter, "I'm glad you didn't go away." Behind him, Zara peeked around the corner. "Are we safe now, Daddy?" My throat tightened. I pulled them both into my arms, feeling the small, real weight of them, the thing no court could legislate and no money could buy. "Yeah, baby," I whispered into Zara's hair. "We're safe. Always." Alina called later that week to wrap up final paperwork. "It's official," she said crisply. "All costs settled, custody confirmed, communication channeled through the court app. No more surprise texts. No more guilt trips." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling deeply. "Thank you, Alina." There was a rare warmth in her voice. "You were one of the good ones, Evan." Across the city, Serafina sat alone in her penthouse. Damon showed me a leaked photo, her silhouette at the window, wine glass in hand, the caption cruel, "From It Girl to Ice Queen, the Fall of Serafina Vale." I looked at it for a long time, then closed my phone. I didn't need to see any more. Her punishment was living inside the world she'd built, and watching it hollow itself out from the inside. Cassian, we heard, had left for Europe. "Work trip," the headlines said. But Damon's sources whispered that no gallery would touch him now. No investor would back his next project. The scandal followed him across the Atlantic, wrapping around his reputation like a shadow. For a man who had defined himself by surface and spectacle, it was a slow, brutal kind of exile. At home, the kids began to relax. Declan stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. Zara laughed more easily, danced around the house without watching the door. We started building a life again. A small, real, unpolished life. We made pancakes on Saturdays, built forts in the living room, stayed up too late on school nights, tinkering with robotics kits and watching old movies. It wasn't perfect. It was ours. One night, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Declan tugged at my sleeve. "Can we invite Damon over?" he asked, shyly. "He's funny." I smiled. "Yeah, bud. We can." When Damon arrived, Zara squealed, running into his arms, and Declan proudly showed him his new drone project. We all piled onto the floor with pizza and movies, the kids squeezed between us, giggling at jokes, Zara half asleep on Damon's arm by the end. As the credits rolled, Damon glanced over at me. "You did it, man," he murmured. I exhaled, quietly, fully. Later, after the kids were in bed, Damon and I sat on the balcony. I thought winning would feel like, I don't know. "Revenge," I admitted softly. Damon tilted his head. "But?" I watched the city lights blink in the distance. "But it just feels like peace." Across the months, things settled. I saw less of Serafina, only the scheduled exchanges, only the necessary messages through the app. Cassian stayed gone. Lyric faded quietly from the edges of my children's stories. Still their stepsister, but no longer the forced symbol of blended perfection Serafina had tried to sell. Declan and Zara grew lighter, more sure of their footing. I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Like myself, there was no big finish, no dramatic apology or final confrontation, just small, ordinary days, ordinary in the way that mattered most. Sunday mornings making waffles, afternoons at the park, late nights fixing Zara's broken toy or helping Declan debug his code. The life I fought for wasn't glamorous. It was messy, warm, real, and it was everything. One evening, Declan came to sit beside me as I read. "Dad?" "Yeah, bud?" He leaned against my arm, quiet. "I'm glad you fought for us." My throat tightened. I pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. "Me too, buddy," I murmured. "Me too." Across the city, Serafina sat in her penthouse, the windows wide and dark, the rooms silent. Across the ocean, Cassian moved through a world that no longer admired him. A man unmasked. But here, in this small apartment, with Lego pieces underfoot and pizza boxes on the counter, I was home. I was whole. I was Dad. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when I realized the storm had finally passed. Not the one outside, but the one that had been living in my chest for years. The townhouse was buzzing with quiet life. Zara was stretched out on the rug, surrounded by markers and stickers, humming softly as she worked on a craft project. Declan was on the couch, laptop propped on his knees, troubleshooting a coding challenge for his robotics club. In the kitchen, a pizza box sat open, half-eaten slices waiting for whoever wandered by. And me? I stood at the window, coffee mug warm in my hand, watching the gray Manhattan skyline blur against the glass, feeling something unfamiliar settle into my bones. Peace. A knock at the door pulled me back. Damon stepped in, shaking rain from his jacket, grinning as Zara shrieked and ran to tackle his legs. "Hey, troublemaker," he laughed, swinging her up onto his shoulders as Declan came over with a shy smile, eager to show him the latest code he'd written. Damon's eyes met mine over their heads, and there was something in that look. A quiet satisfaction, a shared understanding. We'd made it. Later that night, after Damon had gone home and the kids were tucked in, I sat alone on the couch, scrolling through old photos. One caught me off guard. Serafina and me, years ago, holding baby Declan, smiling like the world was only just beginning. For a moment, I let myself feel it. The grief, the anger, the weight of everything we'd lost. But then I scrolled forward. Declan at his first soccer game, Zara in her Halloween costume, me with them at the park, at the science fair, at home. The moments that mattered, the ones that built this life. Not curated, not staged, real. Across town, I knew Serafina was alone. I'd heard from mutual friends that she was struggling. The charity boards had distanced themselves. The art circles had gone quiet. The social media glow she'd relied on had dimmed, the polished perfection cracking under the weight of public fallout and private emptiness. And Cassian? Gone. He'd slipped off to Europe, trying to outrun the headlines, but from what Damon heard,
His name was radioactive now. Investors pulled out. Galleries shut their doors. His charm, the very thing he'd weaponized to build his empire, had become his curse. It was the kind of downfall neither of them saw coming, and I didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. I hadn't won everything. I still shared custody, still navigated the necessary co-parenting logistics, still answered the occasional clipped message through the parenting app. But the difference was, now there were boundaries. Now there was no more guessing, no more sudden ambushes at school events or manipulative family invitations. Now, I had my kids, my home, and the space to rebuild. One evening, as we cleaned up from dinner, Declan surprised me. "Dad?" he asked softly. I glanced up. "Yeah, bud?" He hesitated, chewing on his lip. Do you ever miss Mom?" I set the dish towel down, sitting across from him at the table. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I think I miss the person I thought she was, not the person she turned out to be." Declan's eyes searched mine, thoughtful and a little sad. "I'm glad you didn't give up," he murmured. I reached over, ruffling his hair. "Me too, kiddo." Zara came barreling in then, arms wide. "Group hug!" Declan laughed, sliding out of his chair to catch her, and I wrapped them both up, pulling them in tight, breathing them in. They were my anchor, my victory, my everything. That weekend, we moved the last of our boxes into the new townhouse. It wasn't the biggest place, or the flashiest, or the most enviable address in Manhattan, but it was ours. We set up a little tech corner for Declan, lined Zara's room with soft lights and her drawings, and painted a wall in the hallway where they could scribble and leave notes. I watched them claim the space, fill it with their energy, their noise, their life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift deep inside me. Not the desperate, brittle need to win, but the simple, quiet joy of knowing I'd made it through. One night, after the kids were asleep, Damon stopped by. We sat on the balcony, beers in hand. The city stretched wide and pulsing below. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" he asked with a grin. I let out a breath, half laughing. "Not in a million years." He nudged my shoulder. "You did good, man." I turned to look at him, the weight of the past year flashing through my mind. The betrayal, the legal battle, the long nights of doubt and exhaustion. "I survived," I murmured. Damon shook his head. "No, you didn't just survive, Evan. You won." As the city lights shimmered below, I thought about Serafina, about Cassian, about the empire they'd tried to build on smoke and mirrors. And then I thought about Declan's arms around my waist, Zara's sleepy voice whispering, "I love you, Daddy," the sound of laughter filling this home. I knew exactly which life I wanted, and I knew exactly which one I had. The next morning, as the sun poured in through the windows, Declan plopped down next to me on the couch, holding out his laptop. "Dad, can you help me with this?" Zara scrambled up on my other side, waving a crayon. "Daddy, look what I drew." I pulled them both close, smiling softly. "I'm all yours, guys." And I meant it. That's the thing about endings. They're not always loud. They're not always dramatic. Sometimes they're just a quiet room, a safe home, and the people you love curled up beside you. Sometimes they're just peace, and for the first time I knew that was more than enough. There are moments in life when the world you know unravels quietly, not with a dramatic crash, but with a slow, aching unraveling you can feel in the smallest moments. A missed glance across the dinner table, a cold word at bedtime, a silence that stretches longer each night. Betrayal rarely arrives as a thunderclap. More often,
It shows up as the gradual erosion of trust, as the painful realization that the person you once leaned on has been slowly slipping away. This story wasn't just about loss or conflict. It was about resilience, the quiet, relentless kind that doesn't demand attention or applause. It's the kind of strength that rises in the everyday, in the decision to stand firm when it would be easier to collapse, in the choice to fight for what matters even when it's exhausting and lonely. What it teaches is simple but profound. No one else defines your worth, your role, or your love. Titles, appearances, public images, they are fragile, crumbling things. But the bonds we build in private, the care we show when no one's looking, the love we pour into the small, unglamorous corners of our lives, those are the things that last. Winning is not always about crushing someone else or proving yourself in a courtroom or public square. Sometimes it's about reclaiming the quiet space of your life, the moments that truly belong to you, and building something honest inside them. It's about refusing to be erased, not by shouting, but by standing steady, being present, and holding close the people and principles that shape who you are. In the end, the story is not about revenge. It's about freedom. It's about the peace that comes when you've done the hard work of protecting what matters, when you've drawn the lines that keep you whole, when you've fought not just for yourself, but for the right to love and lead without interference or manipulation. It's about knowing you came through something, not untouched, not unchanged, but unbroken. Thank you for joining us on this journey, for staying through the pain, the twists, the quiet triumphs. We hope this story moved you, challenged you, or maybe even gave you something to carry into your own life. If it sparked something in you, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Your reflections remind us why we tell these stories, because they echo across lives, across places, connecting us in ways we sometimes don't even realize. If you haven't already, we'd love for you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next story we share. Every view, every comment, every shared moment helps us keep this space alive, and we're grateful to have you here. Until next time, take care, hold close what matters, and remember, some of the most important battles are the ones fought quietly, in the heart.